What? Gev watched the new human employees leave the transport tube and walk slowly to the factory. They were brand new, so they were still relatively weak and slow. Their world, Earth, while being technically classified as a death world, had only about 80% of Param's gravity. As the humans stayed here and ate exceptionally nutritionally dense food, they would build muscle and bone density. Even their cartilage and ligaments would be reinforced by their bodies. In contrast to mammal humans, paramans were reptilian, mostly herbivorous, but enjoyed crunchy insects, and they were about 10% taller than humans. Being reptilian, they didn't have the tolerance for extreme heat and cold like humans, so working outside the temperature zone required bulky environmental suits that were expensive and slowed down efficiency. Humans, due to their extraordinary adaptability, had a far greater range and simply needed proper clothing. Param was the fifth planet in the solar system, occupying the fourth orbital position. The first and second orbital positions had one planet each, while the third position had two planets. The dating system of the Paramite calendar included positions of the third planets in relation to the horizon and constellations, so their historical dates were well verified. Param's axis had magnetic north always facing toward the star, with south always facing away. The heat in the north caused constant winds which moved the atmosphere and helped to conduct heat. There were oceans being stirred by the planet's rotation and had chaotic tides that were affected by 4 moons. The moons orbited Param so that they swirled around the planet in line with the axis rather than circling the equator. The moons caused frequent eclipses, which also helped mitigate heat from the star. Because the moons traveled perpendicular to the planet's rotation, that also helped to stir the atmosphere and ocean. However, only about 20% of the planet near the equatorial region was comfortably habitable. There was another 10% on each side of that equatorial region that was uncomfortably habitable. But the rest of the planet was simply too hot or too cold. Natural resources in the habitable areas had been drained. The Paramite government had started mining operations into the harsher environments, but the expense was prohibitive, and worker attrition was unsustainable. Then, someone came up with the idea of recruiting Deathworlders, specifically humans. Human workers were incredibly useful. They received top medical care on Param because it seemed that their species was constantly actively evolving. New employees would come here fairly weak. The vast majority were initially unsuited to anything but very light labor, and you would think it would take at least 4 generations for them to adapt. Instead, their adaptation was closer to 4 months, half the time needed to gestate a new human. During that time, the human would require excessive amounts of nutrients and sleep, sometimes 12 hours, more than half a Paramite day, and even longer if sick or injured. They could also withstand a broader temperature range than Paramans, making them suitable for both the hot north and cold south. They could even change environments, not being restricted to working in only the heat or the cold. If they were transferred from one region to the other, it would take them a couple of weeks to be comfortable, but they could work immediately. Their stamina was amazing. Evidently, their species had evolved to hunt, not by overpowering or overtaking prey, but by running it to exhaustion. Humans retained this feature, and that they were even able to eat and drink during walking and running. Gev went down to start to greet the new employees and rode in an elevator down to the ground level. He saw several seasoned humans walking downstairs and a few walking up, rather than taking an elevator. The workers had developed their own subculture, and part of it was geared towards making each other as physically fit as possible. They would use subtle and overt peer pressure. "Hey buddy, I know the gravity is heavy here, but you do need to walk downstairs. I feel it too. It will help you get used to this place faster. Just think about the gravity is actually helping you go down faster." Or, "No, unless you have light-duty restriction from Doc, get your lazy ass off that elevator. There's no reason to ride going down. You're not special, princess. Everyone else has to deal with the gravity too. Suck it up." He approached a podium and gave a brief speech. "Welcome, new employees. I'm but you can call me Gev. Now is distributing orientation packets to you now. Please make sure that you receive your own packet because all of the information inside will be important to you specifically. With your packet is a hydration container. There are kiosks all over where you can exchange them for full containers. Because of the different atmosphere and gravity, you need to hydrate frequently. We have safety posters in all workspaces to help you maintain safe and healthy habits. Now, A word from Carl, who will be your supervisor and advisor during orientation. A human walked up to the podium. Hey everyone. Like Gev almost said, I'm Carl. There's good news and more good news. Don't get too excited. There will be plenty of bad news to even things out later. The good news is that the translators are pretty good here for our 5 main languages. The other good news is that everyone gets a name tag with your name in human and paramite. Now, everyone uses a short version of their name to make it easier to talk. That's one of the reasons why it's important to make sure that you have your own packet, because it has your name tag. You use your name tag for everything, so don't lose it. He waited for everyone to get the packets. All right, let's turn to page 5. Gev twitched a brow ridge at him. It didn't make sense to put page packets in a different order than they would be referred to during orientation. Carl had tried to explain that humans had a bizarre relationship with written instructions, which is why regulations and instructions were presented in the order that humans would use them, while printed instructions were in the order that the reader should use them. Okay, you'll know it's page 5 because there's a nice big 5 at the bottom. If you don't see that, you're on the wrong page. The humans fumbled for a moment, a few hands going up. Carl told the gathering, if someone next to you has his hand up, help him find the right page. Humans pointed to each other's packets, and most hands went down, although one stayed up. Carl continued, and that he's not holding his packet sideways or upside down. The other employee next to the human with his hand up grabbed his packet, shifted it to correct orientation, then gave it back. Gev chuckled. Humans were intelligent, creative, clever, and resourceful, but sometimes certain actions made you wonder if they still had areas of their brains that weren't fully evolved. Perhaps these incidents came from a childhood traumatic brain injury that hadn't healed correctly. He had also learned that these lapses were extremely common, since humans had endless euphemisms to describe the behavior in individuals. Dumber than a box of hair, oxygen thief, the elevator doesn't go to the top floor, a special kind of stupid, and one that was either a religious prayer for someone's well-being or an insult invoking a deity to deal with a troublesome individual. Bless their heart. Human females seemed particularly fond of that one, and were also the only ones who could correctly determine how it was being used. One human in the front seat sat leaned back in his chair without a packet. He had the thicker body of a seasoned employee, rather than the thinner frames of new employees, and he was also wearing an incorrect company issue work uniform with his hat on backwards. Carl pointed to him. Where's your packet? The employee answered, I'm Fred. I just got back from the sabbatical on Earth. I had family business. Anyway, I was on B shift, but now I'm assigned to A shift. Carl nodded. Okay, everyone, meet your new class leader, Fred. He spoke directly to Fred. Since we got a batch of newbies, and you'll need time to reacclimate, we will just put you in with this class. Thanks for volunteering to be class leader. Fred shrugged. I'm getting paid, right? Carl replied. Keep them out of trouble, and yes, you are. Carl now continued with the class. All right, for the next 2 weeks, mornings will be spent in physical fitness training, helping you to get in shape and acclimate to the gravity. Afternoons will be spent in apprenticeship for your jobs. The schedule is set in stone, especially start and stop times. Mass transit to and from work is free. It runs on time all the time. Miss it? Get here on your own dime. That means you'll have to take a taxi, which you pay for, and missed work time is also missed wages. Carl gave them a moment to grumble. You need to know something about paraments. Their schedules are sacred and completely non-negotiable. To them, late is late, regardless of reason. Think about Germans, then go about 100 steps past that. You get paid according to production. If you don't turn in your quota in time for processing day, then it goes to tomorrow. Equipment broke, stopped to get a drink, tripped on the way, doesn't matter. If it's due by 0500, then 0500 and 1 second is tomorrow's quota. You get paid daily on your way back to the train. Now turn to page 2. Carl paused and drank. Gev asked him quietly, Is your entire species so disorganized about time management? You would tell all of them the same thing. Surely you have at least one tribe that can adhere to a schedule. Carl replied, Different species, different culture. Germans are about the closest we have, but you guys still take it to a whole other level. He looked out, and the workers appeared to be on page 2. All right, the biological schedules. We've got 2 shifts, A and B. A few hands went up. All of you are on A shift. The hands went down. You will also be living in A towns, Anaheim, Auckland, Albuquerque, Acapulco, etc. The lighting in those towns is set so that the sun rises at 0101 and sets at 1100. The train that you ride to work has low-level lighting when you get aboard, which adjusts to bright light once you get to your work center. The train home starts as bright light, then turns down to near dark when you get home. All of our environmental controls are set so that working hours are daylight hours. Because this planet is sideways, they don't have the normal daily cycle here. You'll see the lighting environmental cycles in human areas. When you go to native areas, they don't have that, so keep an eye on the clock, or you'll overdo it and get burned out. He produced a pair of wrap-around glasses from a pocket. I advise you to get a pair of these. More pairs if you're the type to lose glasses. They are programmed to filter light on our schedules. You just select if you are A or B shift. There's a vending machine here with basic sets. You can buy fancier ones back in the towns. Fred had pulled a pair out of a pocket and was casually waving them for others to see. Carl smiled. It would definitely be worth it to pay Fred during orientation. Usually, rehires wouldn't get paid because they knew the rule. No production, no pay. But Fred was seasoned and would be able to explain why things are what they are and keep others out of trouble. Carl continued. If you decide you want to switch shifts, it's a 2-week process. First week is unpaid vacation. Second week is supervised, basically micromanaged. The last few pages have information on savings accounts. Review them later. He paused. You're going to have to get used to a lot of rules that may seem like they don't make sense at first, but they come from 2 sources. He held up 2 fingers on his hand. He noticed that Fred also held up 2 fingers and mouthed the same words. This is not Earth. This is Param. The employees by Fred chuckled. Carl jokingly addressed Fred. Thank you. Your assistance with that was greatly appreciated. He went to the class. It's a different physical environment and culture here. You can make really good money, but only if you follow the rules. This planet is sideways, so they don't have the normal day-night cycles, and it will mess you up. That's why our environmental controls are set on creating a day-night cycle. Also, days here are only 22 hours, not 24, so that will take some adjusting too. Humans have been working on this rock for 17 years, and we have learned sometimes the hard way that these rules and environmental setting are absolutely necessary. He saw some skeptical faces. He could see a couple that were probably determined to learn the hard way. That was their decision. Life hurts you when you're stupid. Okay, everyone, 15-minute break. Fred answered back. Can we make it 20? I'll show the newbies the beverage dispenser. Carl nodded. 20-minute break. Fred walked over to the dispenser and pulled out his bottle. Take a look, folks. It doesn't get easier. He inserted his bottle into a slot. Put your old bottle here. See these 2 buttons? He pointed. One for human and one for Paramin. Push the button that looks like you. You get some water with some electrolytes. Staying hydrated is no joke on this rock. Another bottle comes out and gets filled. One of the other employees asked, What happens with the bottles? Fred answered, Sterilized and reused. There was a nervous murmur in the crowd. Fred took a drink from the filled bottle the machine gave him. Don't worry, they get really sterilized. The Paramins are paranoid as hell about catching diseases from us. They constantly sterilize the crap out of everything. It's why you had to get so many shots to come here, and why you have to get a bunch more. They are all convinced that mammals carry plagues and the apocalypse, especially our hair. Go ahead and fill up your bottles. It will be the cleanest thing you have ever touched in your life. The rest of the day was spent in class, taking a tour of the facility. After lunch, Fred was handed a welcome packet by Carl, which was modified for personnel switching from B shift to A shift. Carl explained, It's funny, but the shifts have developed their own cultures. I guess you could say there are some comparison lists for you to review. The 2-week orientation was grueling as the new employees got used to the gravity. Fred advised everyone that the first purchase they wanted to save up for was an in-home jacuzzi to soothe tired muscles. The new employees were stunned how minor bumps and bruises were more severe and painful. One guy fractured a finger by catching a ball wrong. There were other strains, sprains, and microfractures. The paramite medical workers would wear hazmat suits around injured humans until it was determined that there was no bleeding whatsoever. Fred answered a lot of questions, which really helped move things along. What happens if you get sick and can't work that day? You don't get paid for the day. Pay is directly related to production. No exceptions. But it's not your fault if you get sick. They don't care. You want pay? You gotta produce. That's why you really should look at those savings plans in the back of your packets. You don't want to end up stuck like Chuck. What's the work week like? You work, you get paid. You don't work, you don't get paid. But when are the days off? When you take a day off. So what happens if I decide tomorrow morning that I don't want to come to work and just stay home? Then you stay home. But what about money? When you want money, you come to work and make money. How do we get credit? Just don't. I'm being serious. So am I. Do they have credit here? Sort of. You have to collateral up to the amount you want to borrow. Let's say you want 5,000 credits. Your vehicle is worth 5,000 credits. You sign over a pawn slip, which includes a repayment schedule. Until you repay that debt in full, the lender owns your vehicle. If you are late making a payment, the lender sells your vehicle. He keeps however much you owe, and you get the rest. How many payments can you miss before they do that? 1. First missed payment, your junk gets sold. What happens if you get in trouble with the law? Oh my God, do not do that. Don't even talk about it. Is the jail here that bad? No, they don't have jails, just retribution. What does that mean? That means whatever offense you commit, that gets done to you right away. You steal 500 credits of stuff, you get fined 500 credits. You punch someone in the nose, and you get punched in the nose. Cops here are judge, jury, and usually executioner. Then they take your ID and put you up on the public safety notices, so everyone knows who you are and what you did. I saw one guy who got in a fight when he was drunk. None of the stores would admit him for 3 months, including grocery stores. He had to get takeout food the whole time, and none of the nice places would serve him either. The only places that would serve him are real dives that make you sick half the time. No one complains because if you're eating there, you're desperate and can't afford for it to close. Hey, have you ever been with a pyramid girl? Yes, I have. And it's really different. Really, really different. So how would I go about talking to one of the women here? You don't. There are places in the human and paramite towns just for people wanting to get some alien action. Well, I wasn't looking for a hooker. It's not like that. They're more like social clubs, not strip bars or swinger clubs, so zero guarantee you'll be doing it. But these are all consenting adults who are open. Some just want to talk to an alien, some are interested in a relationship, and some you will get freaky with. It's okay to tell them up front what you're looking for, as long as you're polite. So, what's the best place to work here? Pick your hell. Freeze your ass off or cook your ass off. What about summer and winter? They don't have seasons here. North is hot as fuck, south is cold as fuck. Is there any advantage to one over the other? Sometimes certain areas have production bonuses. They might need more of a certain material, or that area just might be on demand. Production bonuses aren't permanent. Don't be surprised if it's here today, gone tomorrow. At the end of the 2-week orientation, nearly half the class had quit. The alien environment, the unforgiving legal and economic systems, the blistering heat and bitter cold had weeded out many. On the first morning when they were going out to work northward, Fred was slathering a heavy coat of sunblock on his exposed skin. He told the others, "Don't skimp on the cream. This place will cook you like bacon. Any safety tools or supplies they give you, use." When they got out to a site, each man had his power tools, a wagon, a few other supplies, and a staked perimeter. The staked perimeter, called a yard, was 4 stakes connected by cords about 10 meters long, so each man could claim a yard of about 100 square meters. Then they began to dig, except for Fred. Each man had been given a chair and large umbrella for a break station. Fred set up his break station first, Some of the other employees, seeing this, stopped digging and set up their brake stations also, then resumed digging. It was insanely back-breaking work. Everything was monstrously heavy. There was dust that mixed with the sunblock cream and made your skin gritty. The air was thick, and the hot wind felt like being cooked in an oven. The equipment was loud. The mineral rocks were so damned heavy. Their own bodies were heavy. A few of the workers wept quietly to themselves. About 2 hours into the shift, a human woman came driving a small cargo vehicle. It was painted bright colors and had pictures of cold refreshments. It played music, cheerful tinkling tunes like bells. "Ice-cold drinks and snacks," she called to the men. She introduced herself to the workers as Trudy, with the logo on her vehicle being Trudy's Treats. The men swarmed to her and began aggressively jostling each other to get a better place in line. Fred laughed at them. He knew Trudy would come to him, because she never missed a sale. He told the men nearest him that she would come to them, so they could keep working if they desired. Trudy got done with the crowd and came over to Fred's area. She was careful to not disturb any yardsticks. The men lined up, eagerly buying cold fruit, beverages, and other snacks. One of the other workers asked Fred, "How long do we get for a break?" Fred answered, "However long you take for break." Another man asked, "We've been out here about 2 hours. Is this the usual break time?" Fred told him, "Break time is when you take a break." The guy was getting frustrated. Why couldn't Fred answer a straight question, especially in this damn heat? "Look, I just don't want to get in trouble. I don't want the boss yelling at me." Fred chuckled and held up his 2 fingers. "Remember the 2 rules? This is not Earth. This is Param. You get paid according to production. You work your ass off and produce a lot, you make money. You sit on your ass and don't do shit, you don't make money. They don't supervise you because it's a waste of everyone's time. If you want money, you work." The men kept working out in the scorching heat. Trudy's Treats would come by every couple hours. The men noticed that halfway through the day, there was a different woman who also called herself Trudy. She explained that it was just easier for everyone for all of them to be Trudy, especially in the brain-melting heat. Between Trudy's runs, another vehicle came, a sanitation truck, Lucy's Loo. It had portable restrooms and misters. The workers grumbled a bit about being charged to use it, until they realized it had air conditioning. One asked Lucy, "Why should I pay you?" Lucy, a tough-looking middle-aged woman, told him frankly, "Because you are free to piss and shit in your own yard, then smell it all day as it bakes in the heat, and hopefully you don't step in it. Or you can use my loo, the sweet blessed air conditioning, and get cooled off. It's entirely up to you." When quitting time came, Fred signaled the others. A few had stopped working earlier, just not able to stand the heat. One young guy, who was catching a second or third wind, had to be aggressively urged to knock off for the day. Fred explained, "I know it doesn't seem that late because of where the sun is. That's why I tell you to keep an eye on the clock." He held up his 2 fingers. "This isn't Earth. This is Param, and you can't trust the sun." The transport came and loaded the men and their wagons. Some men had just filled the wagons to the brim, with as many rocks as possible, with any sign of ore. Others had filled their wagons only with very promising chunks. Fred's cart was completely full. He had spent most of the day going after more promising chunks, then, at the end of the day, just scooped in anything that was loose. As the men took their places in line for ore turn-in, Fred just left his at the back of the line, where it would be taken to processing by the automated truck. As he headed to the exit, one of the other new employees called him. "Hey, Fred, are you going to turn in your cart?" Fred pointed at the clock and the line. "Turn-in for the day is in 8 minutes. I won't be at the station in time, and neither will you, actually. You won't get paid for this until tomorrow. Why stand around here when I can go to the train? They serve beer on the way back. I'm going to go chill and knock back a couple of brewskis." The other employee was feeling uneasy about leaving his cart, so he stayed with it. When he got to the station, a Paraman woman scanned the card and told him, "Thank you. Your money will be available at 0930 tomorrow." The employee protested, "But we get paid daily. That's what we were told." She responded by pointing to the sign that said, "Production material, turn in is at 0900. Payment will be rendered at 0930. She told him, "It's 0903. He grew agitated. But I was in this line at 0850. She continued pointing at the sign. He got more aggravated. This is bullshit! She continued pointing at the sign. He grew desperate. I'm sorry, look, it's just been a really long, hot day. I'm not asking for anything extra, just to get paid for the work I did, that's all. She continued pointing at the sign. He tried one last time. You saw I was in line. Please? She continued to point at the sign. He walked off after giving an exasperated sigh. The next man in line gave her the card and asked, So I guess I don't get paid until tomorrow either. She pointed at the sign. Luckily, the other humans didn't try arguing. She pulled out sanitizing cloths and wiped down herself and her workstation. While she hadn't actually touched any of the aliens, you couldn't be too careful. At the end of their work shifts, they were so pungent. Being mammals, they would cool themselves by secreting saline, and who knows what stored pathogens. The humans were bizarrely fascinating. Her friends were constantly asking her questions about them, eagerly listening to stories of even mundane tasks and rules for dealing with them. One of the rules was that work and safety policies were on posters all over the factory. This was essentially for the humans' benefit, since they were dealing with an alien environment. Humans also loved to argue. Arguing was actually very normal discourse for them. When a human disputed a work policy, the best strategy was to point to the sign and not respond. If you did engage in any way, it would prolong the dispute. It's as though they gained energy from your response, be it sympathy or resistance. Simply not responding and pointing to the sign would drain the humans' resistance. On the train home, Fred bought every man on his work crew a beer. Congrats on surviving your first day in hell. May there be many more. A few were sipping the beers sullenly, while others were cheerful. They peppered Fred with more questions. Weren't you worried about leaving your cart there? What if someone tries taking your stuff and putting it in your cart? Nope. There are security cameras everywhere, plus scales on the carts and location trackers. You try to steal, you will be caught. Whatever money you earn that day gets paid to the guy you tried to steal from. That's why there are no paramite jails. Everything gets handled instantly with retribution. Oh, your ID also gets shared all over the factory, so everyone knows you're a thief. Have fun with that. The employee gave a broken sigh. I don't know if I can do it again. I knew it would be hard, but I didn't think this hard. Everything is so heavy, and that damn heat. It was too hot to breathe. He hid his face, trying to cover that he was choking back sobs. The other men discreetly looked elsewhere. Fred put a hand on his shoulder. Hey, it's okay. I've been there. You should have seen me when I first got here. I was less than 50 kilos soaking wet, and every day I thought I was going to die. I spent a lot of money calling my mom. The first 2 months, I could only work every other day. It's hard. I felt like I had won a prize the first time I worked 2 days in a row. Of course, it kicked my ass so bad I spent the next 3 days in bed. But you get used to it. You're a lot tougher than you think. Give it time. And when you go back to Earth, there are women. You are loaded with cash, and you put on muscle in this gravity. So the women are like, Hey, puppy. One of the others who had been looking especially defeated asked, Wait, every other day? You can do that? You don't get in trouble? Fred shook his head. No, like I said, you get a day off when you take a day off. That's it. There's no sick leave, vacation, PTO, holidays, none of that. But they also don't tell you when you have to work. The only restrictions they have are when you switch shifts. Another man, Luke, asked, Yeah, what's up with that? Fred explained. It's for safety. Since this rock doesn't have a normal day-night cycle and humans need it, and our cycle is being artificially maintained, it's really easy to get your sleep screwed up. When your sleep is screwed up, there are accidents. Normally, you get to make your own decisions on Param and just live with whatever consequences. But too many guys tried going to work sleep-deprived, and accidents got others hurt and cost a lot of money, so they made an actual rule about it. Fred held up the 2 fingers again. Some of the guys held up 2 fingers also and in unison with Fred. This is not Earth. This is Param. Fred chuckled and continued. On Earth, they make rules for everything, even how to blow your nose. On Param, they really are Darwinists and hate making rules, but rather just let natural consequences and retribution sort everything out. One employee retorted clinically, "The barbaric eye for an eye system leaves everyone blind. You don't solve anything that way. You have to get to the root causes." Fred ordered a second beer from a server, then answered back, "On Param, it solves a lot of problems. You don't mess with someone else when you know it's going to come straight back at you. And instant justice does address root causes by teaching people right off the bat that harmful behavior isn't tolerated. If you have issues, they have tons of social resources. But if you harm someone because you have issues, at that point, you get harmed back. And you still have the issues. The highest crime areas on Param are B-shift towns. They follow the Earth justice system. That's why when I got back here, I switched to A-shift even though it meant a pay cut. When I get off work, I want peace and quiet." They were nearly at the station and the employees noted how dark the train had gotten in their hour-long ride. One of the employees noted that the train should easily be able to go faster. Fred explained that the hour duration was quite deliberate, so that the train ride could adequately stimulate sunset and dusk, like the morning train stimulated dawn and sunrise. Fred told them, "Paramite scientists have been studying everything about us they can. They probably know stuff that even Earth scientists don't know. All scientific research is public record. You can go to a science library and see what happened to the poor bastards before the day-night cycles were instituted. It was crazy." Gev, Carl, and several other factory managers were meeting in a tower conference room. Not Burr, was speaking. "We need to cut costs. These extra expenses for climate controls in human towns are unacceptable." Carl retorted angrily, "We make you plenty of money. You don't like it? Go dig up your own damn rocks." Burr shouted back, "We pamper you disease-ridden malcontents far too much. It's no surprise that the worst crime is in human towns." Carl seethed. Yes, the B-shift towns had their problems, but the culture was closer to Earth and B-shifters generally had lower attrition among new employees than A-shift. Of course, once employees became well acclimated to life on Param, many would request to transfer to A-shift. Attrition for seasoned employees on A-shift was rare, and several disgruntled seasoned B-shift employees could be retained simply by transferring them to A-shift. "Look, yes, there are issues with B-shift towns, because we use them as a compare and control group. Now that we have years of hard data, we can actually expand to have C and D shifts. Since we have already had our growing pains, we will save a hell of a lot of money on setup while drastically increasing productivity." Gev spoke up. "I propose we send Carl, Burr, and a research team to Earth. How long should a team go for?" 2 weeks. "A year." Burr and Carl glared at each other while Gev worked on a compromise. "Let's say 6 months. That should give adequate time to survey the different regions, collect data, learn the culture, and maybe engage in local leisure activities. Does that sound acceptable?" Carl held his hand up. "A year would be better, so you get a good look at the seasons. Plus, while regions may initially look similar, there are huge differences. And we don't have a culture. We have a lot of cultures." Gev nodded. "Like your 5 languages?" Carl shook his head. "We don't have 5 languages. We have 5 main languages. We actually have over 1,000 languages, which are split even further into sub-languages." The humans around the table nodded while the Paramans looked at Carl in disbelief. Burr snapped, "Oh, please! Why do you insist on these impossible untruths? You are obviously quite overdue for a psychological examination." Carl was trying very hard to not completely lose it on this jerk. He punched his meaty fists against each other. "I just can't with this guy." Gev could tell that prolonging the meeting would only result in escalating hostilities. "Very well, then. It's decided. There will be a 6-month expedition to Earth. Departure is set for 5 weeks from now, when Opley starts crossing the tail of the Trickster." Opley and Napley were the planets in the 3rd orbital ring of the solar system. The Trickster was an ancient folk deity and constellation. 7 weeks later, the expedition to Earth arrived. Paramite scientists were needing human escorts to act as liaisons, and they had been flooded with volunteers. Those selected talked endlessly and excitedly about everything they missed about Earth in minute detail. One scientist joked that with everything the humans had told them, the expedition itself was no longer necessary, because there was no possible way that there was any data that hadn't been covered. They landed at a historic site in the northern hemisphere near the western coast. This had originally been a research institute where humans had used various types of communication signals to try to determine if alien life existed before joining the galactic community. They arrived in the middle of the day, with the sun directly overhead. The Paramans were prepared for the smell of alien atmosphere as well as they could be, and had canisters of air to take a puff if they got short-winded. But the sun being directly overhead was just odd. They noticed that their shadows were quite small, directly underneath them. When they were inside registering, they noticed that the humans were all agitated, and getting more so by the minute. The only relief for this was for them to go outside. The intake official referred to their emotional state as cabin fever, and reassured the Paramans that it would wear off eventually. When Burr asked how many days, the official chortled. Days? Not even. Bare minimum. 2 weeks. Depending on how long they've been gone, it could take months. He called over to Carl, who was actually standing rather than sitting in front of another desk, shifting his weight back and forth on his legs. Hey, buddy, how long you been gone? Carl stretched his arms a moment and replied, 17 years. The official exhaled vigorously and told Burr, You guys are scheduled to be here for 6 months? He will probably still have it when we process you out. Burr closed his eyes and leaned his head back. Humans were annoying under normal conditions. Now, his group was acting like they had overdosed on performance stimulants. 6 months of this was unthinkable. They had arrived in a month called September. The Paramans snickered, because it sounded very much like fruit eaten by Burr. The humor escalated as the remaining months of the year were named October, gave birth to Burr. November bumped into Burr, and December, infection from Burr. The infection became Burr's new unfortunate nickname. It was after 5 p.m. local time when they were finally done. The employees directed the group to the building roof to watch the sunset. Burr questioned the delay. His official told him, Trust me, they need this, and it will happen. They will stop your transport vehicle in the middle of the freeway if necessary to watch the sunset. I see it all the time. I hear your planet has this weird sideways access. You should go up and watch it too. You may find it interesting. Burr muttered on the way up. Do humans seriously watch the weather for entertainment? The Galactic Council obviously rushed to judgment deeming them sentient. The crowd from Param and the other humans returning to Earth, plus several Institute employees stood on the roof. The Paramans observed that their shadows were much longer now, and the sky had grown darker and was turning different colors. The sun was now much lower in the sky, straight ahead instead of directly overhead. One scientist, a climatologist, pulled out a video recorder to observe the sky. Several Paramans were getting extremely nervous. This solar position was similar to the deep south of their world, where the frozen climate had made it inhabitable. They grew frightened of the impending cold. As the bottom edge of the sun began to disappear, some humans began cheering, others began weeping, and many did both. The emotional reaction grew more intense as the sun sank lower. The humans clasped hands and began hugging each other, and a few even grabbed the hands and hugged Paramans. The Paramans were too anxious to protest. As the top edge of the sun disappeared, there was a loud cry from the crowd, a combination of cheers and body-shaking sobs. Some humans actually fell to their knees. They all hugged each other intensely. A human woman had completely abandoned all decor and hugged Burr tightly, then released him, wiping at her tear-drenched face. She said, Oh God, I didn't realize how much I missed that. Then she walked away, breaking into fresh sobs, and was absorbed by a circle of random humans all hugging each other. When the group got to their hotel, many human members hastily dumped their luggage and acquired alcohol, then proceeded to have an impromptu outdoor party. They spent the evening playing music ridiculously loud, pointing to the darkened sky with its single lonely moon, and even invited random strangers to join them. Burr saw this hedonistic revelry and grew more alarmed. At one point, some of the partiers ran out of alcohol, and Burr thought they would surely retire to their rooms to rest. Instead, a small group of the women shouted in unison, Time to call the Winebulance! It seemed that the Winebulance was alcohol delivery service. Burr, desperate for relief, had tried asking a drunken Carl when the party would end. In response, He had turned on an ancient folk melody where the men howled the refrain, "We ain't going down until the sun comes up." Evidently, this was some sort of mating ritual because the humans began dancing in a coordinated group. Although the basic moves were the same, they were performed by each person in such a way as to enhance their specific gender attributes, and couples began slipping away. Finally, Burr could endure no more. He was heading to his own room when he was intercepted by a small crowd of humans who physically laid hands on him and turned him around, then marched him back to the party. When he tried protesting, the entire group, male and female, howled in unison, "We ain't going down until the sun comes up." Burr discovered that this was a literal threat. Some hours later, the sun rose from the opposite horizon. The humans watched it quietly, almost reverently, with some hugs and soft tears, then finally went to bed. Burr was beyond relieved. He had never experienced or even hallucinated such a night, and eagerly looked forward to being unconscious and waking up back home, far away from this chaotic fantasy. The group broke up into teams, with each team going to a different region for 3 weeks, then coalescing to share information, decide new destinations, and form new teams. The Paramans were concerned when they found out that the sunset and sunrise were daily events, but relieved that there was rarely a repeat of the first night. They learned about seasons and how the northern and southern hemispheres had opposite seasons. They learned that the duration of day and night changed according to season. Carl made sure that Burr was on the teams experiencing the most drastic environments, so that Burr experienced both 21 days of night and 21 days of white nights at the poles. Because Earth had only a single moon, which did have an important effect on the tides, some Paramans were taken to beaches and shown surfing, and how a whole new set of wildlife became active at night with noises, so many sounds. They had arrived at fall in the northern hemisphere, so the human guides took the Paramans to several harvest festivals and to spring festivals in the southern hemisphere. They were taken to mountains, deserts, oceans, swamps, forests, and jungles. They toured farms and were educated how crops and livestock animal production were dictated by seasons and day-night cycles. Paramite mental health workers were taken to psychiatric hospitals, where they were educated about seasonal affected disorders, as well as the cause and effect relationship between low-level lighting and depression. One Paramite mental health worker remarked, "Lighting and mood really is a circular function with humans. Low light causes depression. Depression causes an aversion to light. The psychosis continually feeds itself." Observing human interaction, Paramites discovered that humans instinctively reckoned time by the position of the sun, even though the days were constantly getting shorter and longer. They conducted blind tests, taking a human to orbit, then returning him to Earth, in an unknown region that was heavily overcast, and he instinctively knew what time of day and what season it was. They also discovered that humans truly did enjoy watching and discussing weather as a pastime. When a region had a certain type of weather very frequently, the indigenous population would have dozens of words in their local language to identify nuanced differences in the weather. They also discovered that while they had observed an extreme reaction to a sunset upon their arrival to Earth, watching sunrise and sunset was a universal spiritual experience for all humans, regardless of religious preference, including devout atheists. Humans had all sorts of odd rituals regarding time of day and season of year. These rules were for food, dress, desired activities, holidays. Even certain shops or dining establishments would be open only at certain times. They told different folk tales and had invented seasonal holidays. But one thing that baffled the Paramans was human flexibility towards time. An unexpected traffic accident was going to cause a group of 12 to be late at a dining reservation. The Paramans were distressed and trying to figure out an alternative food source when their human escort told them reassuringly, "It's okay. I called and told them we got held up in traffic. They said it's fine. They just moved our reservation back 20 minutes. The escort had to repeat and explain everything, that this would not cause refusal of service, criminal penalty, extra surcharges, or any other consequence than perhaps waiting a bit to get a large enough table prepared. The bizarre mammals actually did have an ingrained cultural handicap regarding time management. When the expedition returned to Param, Burr spoke to the corporate council from a seated position, since he was still somewhat weak from Earth's lighter gravity. "After the trip to Earth, and seeing humans in their natural habitat, I now withdraw all my objections regarding their climate control. They are completely dependent on their sun to regulate their physical, mental, and emotional health. Their bodies even produce necessary nutrients by being exposed to light. It's as though they have a system of photosynthesis. Paleobiologists have speculated about a life form that is the divergence point between plants and animals. Humans may be a highly evolved version of such a life form. My recommendation going forward is to incorporate C and D shifts and to accept human proposals regarding the scheduling of their climate controls. This truly is a survival need for their kind.